Upon the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, a light has dawned. It's always good to look on the bright side. You can say snowstorms are a big inconvenience, or you can say snow can be beautiful, or yay, the kids get a chance to play. But sometimes we become jaded, and it can be hard to see the bright side. I remember as a young adult when snow no longer had its appeal. It just meant more work and trouble because I still had to work anyway. And so I became one of those people that I never understood as a kid, complaining about snow. But I didn't like that version of me, so it wasn't hard to change. I just bought some cross-country skis and decided to find a way to like snow again. But have you ever faced a reckoning in which you try to look on the bright side and become convinced there isn't one? This is true darkness, when there is a loss and you can't see how it can be recovered. You experience a void that isn't assuaged by Pollyanna pictures of a brighter day. You lift up your chin, but still see no consolation. This lack of hope may not cover every aspect of your life, but rather be a void in a particular area for which you see no remedy. From a global perspective, we have the loss of Christendom and the spiritual darkening of Europe that spreads across the Atlantic. On a personal level, it might be an emotional wound that darkens your perspective in ways that no one understands. Or it simply can be a sin or failure that still haunts you even after you go to confession. If this is ever true for you, allow me to bring to your attention the lost tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, mentioned in Isaiah and quoted by Jesus in Matthew. These were tribes that were lost to the kingdom of Israel. Isaiah says, "In the former time he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali." These two tribes were the very first tribes to be conquered and deported by Assyria 7 years before, and it was an area that included Galilee, where Jesus began his ministry. But Matthew here mentions Zebulun and Naphtali by name, which is significant because they were no longer called that in Jesus' day. That shows just how far they were gone after 700 years. They were virtually forgotten and given up for lost. So Matthew wants, by calling them Zebulun and Naphtali, which is anachronistic at that time, Matthew wants the reader and you and me to think historically about what happened. So yes, these two tribes were the first to go by the way of the Assyrians, years before the later Babylonian exile. So Israel had learned for a long time to simply live without them. But then we have to consider, without those two tribes, could Israel ever fulfill its calling? Can it ever be the same? Because remember, there were 12 tribes called to be the kingdom of Israel. And this was part of all that was given to King David. So after that, there was only 10. David, of course, was from Judah, but his real kingdom included all the tribes. That was the promise to Abraham. So will God's people ever be the same? So the passage refers to those lands as people dwelling in darkness. Darkness because they are oppressed, and that oppression produces some form of bitterness. It's a fitting analogy for our own forms of darkness. which can be, as we discussed, something on a global scale, something very personal. However it might be, though, if we ignore it, it will still be there like a black hole that sucks energy from the present. So, in order to address this, we begin with realized redemption. So, Isaiah refers to the redemption of Naphtali and Zebulun in the past tense. He says, "In the latter time, he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, the Galilee of the nations," which refers also to Zebulun and Naphtali. And he says, "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone." But when Isaiah wrote these words, they were still separated from the kingdom of Israel, and they still would be hundreds of years later. So this redemption hasn't happened yet, but he is so sure that it's going to occur that he refers to that redemption in the past tense. How can this speak to you and me? Well, consider the way our redemption is spoken of in the past tense throughout Scripture. St. Paul writes to the Colossians, "He has delivered us," past tense, "he has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son." This is true for you and me, even if we haven't realized it yet in every aspect of our lives. So that is realized redemption, but the fact of the matter is, we still have recurring sadness. Why is that? So, because Jesus has already come to us. So why, if that's true, do we still feel loss? So let's address this in ways that really speak to our current reality. You once embraced the promise, "You are the light of the world." At least I hope you did. And when you did so, you felt as if that light could never flicker or be snuffed out. But now, some of you no longer have the full joy of your first love, and you've adjusted to a new normal. If that ever describes you, then Zebulun and Naphtali offer new hope because they experienced the same. They had great promises that by all appearances seemed to be lost. Listen to what Jacob said about his son Naphtali. "Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns." Later, Moses blessed the whole tribe. "Naphtali is abounding with the favor of the Lord and is full of his blessing. He will inherit southward to the lake." But this didn't seem to be true anymore. But what appeared to be set back was really a setup for Jesus to come through. Which is why we embrace the realized redemption in the context of this recurring sadness with resurgent renewal. Jesus went to Naphtali first. It was the most powerful place to launch a ministry to Israel. It was very symbolic as he begins where there was the least amount of hope. Do you think he might come to us the same way now? So Jesus came to restore that kingdom in a way that wasn't possible to human eyes. How? How? His presence was enough. Let's consider from Scripture, just paraphrase, well, not just literally the words from Scripture, direct quotes, just picking it out from the way Paul refers to Jesus, who he is for you and me. He is our all in all. He is our righteousness, our sanctification, our redemption. He is our strength. So these fill what we experience as a temporal void. Now, by filling the temporal void, it doesn't mean that the things you have lost don't still leave an ache. Let's consider, for example, the loss of a loved one. That loss is still important because it means that loved one mattered. So temporal losses still affect us, but the presence of Jesus is a foretaste of what St. Paul calls the fullness of time. He's a foretaste of what we hear of in the book of Revelation, that Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. He is the completion of all things. And his presence, when he becomes our strength in the midst of time, when he becomes our righteousness and sanctification and redemption, that is a promise that all things will be redeemed, and nothing is beyond the reach of God's redemption. So, what of the kingdom of Israel? Were Zebulun and Naphtali restored? Well, Jesus speaks of the kingdom like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. This means that the kingdom of heaven is expansive beyond imagining. Jesus is restoring much more than Zebulun and Naphtali. So it's significant that both Jews and Gentiles were living in the previously lost land of Zebulun, Naphtali, and Galilee when Jesus was there. This was Jesus' launch pad, not only to restore Israel, but the entire world. And this is why, when calling the first disciples, Jesus makes them fishers of men. Each of those disciples had individual wounds that needed healing. But Jesus heals them by turning them not inward, but outward, to be part of his healing mission that will extend beyond them. How? Because yes, ultimately after his resurrection, his presence is in them, but they then bring his presence to the whole world. This is what we experience in the Mass, his presence in us as we're sent out to bring that presence, that promise of the fullness of time wherever we go. So let's make the most of the snow day that is soon to come, because yes, there is a bright side. Reflect on the fact that nothing is beyond the reach of God's redemption. God will not only restore what is lost to you, but he will do so as he uses you to bring his healing hope to others. A hope to be whole in Jesus that knows no bounds.